good morning, good evening to everybody, all our viewers around the world. My name is Deepika Zutshi, and I welcome you to BharatTV studios. Today, we have an exclusive from the BharatTV news studios. It's going to be a very critical conversation that we are going to be having, and I have a very special guest here tonight who's going to be talking with me about the Ukraine situation and Russia's aggression on Ukraine. So please join me for the next hour as we speak with Major General S.B. Asthana. Major General, welcome to Bharat TV's studios.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be speaking to Bharat Media, and my namaste to everyone who is on the show and who's watching the show.
Thank you very much. Major General, you don't need any introduction. You are a very constant sight on a lot of the media channels. And the reason for that, if viewers are not aware of the status of Major General Asthana, he is a global security and strategy analyst. And he's a very, very sage and wise voice on all matters military, all matters security, and military strategy. He is a Seva Medal winner. He's a Vishisth Seva Medal winner and has many, many years of experience within and outside the army. Major General, I couldn't think of a better person today to help us unpack the situation going on in Russia and Ukraine. So thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Sir, let's go and get started. Let's just dive right in. My first question for you is, are we on the brink, or is this the beginning of the Third World War? What do you think?
I don't think it is the beginning of Third World War, because as far as the two sides are concerned, NATO and Russia, I don't think they have any intention of joining borders or fighting with each other.
Correct.
But certainly it's a very serious situation, and in a serious situations, there are many things which can happen. The fact is that when US President initially spoke, and a couple of days back, he gave in no uncertain terms that we will be preventing every inch of territory of NATO. That excludes Ukraine, because Ukraine is not a member of NATO as yet.
Correct.
And secondly, he mentioned that my troops are not going to fight in Ukraine. So with these two preambles, I don't think it's a case of Third World War. But it's a brewing situation, a situation which has grown for quite some time, and a situation which can explode also till for quite some time, unless it is brought under control with certain permanent measures. Now, what I mean to say with this is that you see in 1991, when USSR disintegrated, at that point of time, a promise was made by West. Baker told Gorbachev in no uncertain terms that we will not move an inch eastwards.
Correct.
But subsequently, they adopted an open door policy. And because of that, they had 14 countries of erstwhile USSR joining NATO. Now, when they reached almost Ukraine, now Ukraine is the buffer zone between Russia and NATO.
Correct.
So once they reached there, that is the time when it was beyond tolerance of Russia, because Ukraine, as you understand, the Crimea he annexed earlier. Correct. Now, why he had to annex Crimea was because from Crimea he can be blocked. His entire Black Sea fleet can be made redundant if Crimea is not with Russia.
Correct.
Similarly, NATO also doesn't want to join border with Russia for a simple reason, because on the eastern edge of Ukraine, there was insurgency which was going on, and NATO was in no mood to inherit an insurgency on its border and joining border with Russia.
Correct.
So that is why, despite Ukraine having demanded to join NATO for quite some time, did not do so.
Correct.
At the same time, Ukraine is a test bed for the big power contestation. And in this big power contestation, everybody has betrayed Ukraine, which also includes Russia. In 2004, there was a Budapest agreement which was signed. And that in that agreement, it was Russia, it was UK, it was United States. And all of them promised Ukraine that you have got about 30% of nuclear weapons. You give it, you sign NPT, and we will ensure that your sovereignty and territorial integrity is not touched. Which Russia also said so.
Right.
They gave away the nuclear weapons, and now what we see is from the Russian side there is an aggression. So Russia has also dished them in a way, and also the West has also dished them, because West had their military trainers there. Obviously, they have no business to have their military trainers there and unnecessarily annoy Russia and cause security concern for Russia. And yet they did not include him in NATO, and they kept giving him a promise. In fact, in the recent Munich conference, the Ukrainian president very clearly said that you tell me what time frame are you going to get me into NATO, or you tell me that you are not going to get me into NATO. Make at least clear, because apparently he may not say so, but on their behalf or on some kind of backing, he was very strong to say, no, I am a sovereign country and I will join whatever I want to. Whereas, and that is what has annoyed Russia beyond a point and caused a concern to Russia beyond a point. So obviously, a country like Russia with 6,000 nuclear weapons cannot accept a nonsense of this kind, that NATO keeps expanding and expanding up to a point where his own border starts joining with NATO. So that was one basic reason. And the second basic reason was that there are a lot of areas like the area of Donbass. Now there is a fair amount of Russian population, and they feel that they have been unfairly treated by the Ukrainians by imposing Ukrainian language and things like that. And they have lost a couple of thousands of people in last about 7-8 years. So considering all this, everybody has done something wrong somewhere. Everybody, nobody is in a clean slate. Even the West is also not a clean slate. Because from the West point of view, today you are talking, everybody is talking that we will sanction Russia because there is a sovereignty issue. He is violating sovereignty of Ukraine. I agree with that. But at the same time, the sovereignty of Iraq was also violated by NATO. The sovereignty of Afghanistan was also violated by NATO. The sovereignty of India has been violated by China, and NATO has not sanctioned China. The sovereignty of South China Sea has also been violated by China, and USA has not sanctioned China. So basically, there is a problem in a manner that President Biden, he was in 1991, if you see officially, Cold War I was supposed to have ended. That is what they declared. But actually, they did not end the Cold War to 1.0, and they kept encroaching towards Russia. That's how 14 countries have joined. And similarly, if you see the other side now, when President Trump was in chair, there was a trade war with China. And of course, by then, the encroachments have also been done in South China Sea and things like that. So they went into Cold War 2.0 with China. And all the military strategies and all these documents also, I mean, they also point towards that direction. So with that situation, now President Biden found that China you can't sanction. Your interdependency on China is hell of a lot. So therefore, that is a major issue. And after a forced withdrawal from Afghanistan, his own reputation in USA was quite, I would say, took a beating. So therefore, he shifted from Cold War 2.0 to back to Cold War 1.0. Because this was actually not the time to boost the ego of Ukrainian president to say that, okay, you make a loudest noise to join NATO. I don't think that was a very good idea. And now, and then what happened? When President Biden made a speech of this kind, that the second strategic error which West has done, which is a very major strategic error, that they thought that by sanctions and condemnation, you can control Putin. That was a strategic error.
Correct.
Because sanctions did not work in past, they will not work in future as well. It's an interconnected world. Europe has tremendous amount of energy dependence on Russia, and Europeans will start creating problems for you if you try and push it too hard. So there is an issue involved, and I've put everything in context in a manner that's how the situation pans out. And I'll talk about this offensive a little later as we converse.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for explaining all sides of the situation so that, somebody that's watching doesn't, gets all sides of the story and not just get either a Western perspective or a Soviet or a Russian perspective or an Indian perspective. You are giving the entire perspective. So that was a great explanation of the story. I just want to add a couple of things, sir, for people who are not informed. Major General mentioned the annexation of Crimea. That happened in 2014. And since then, they're claiming that the Donbass region that Major General mentioned, that basically has the two big cities of Donetsk and Luhansk, that area has become a so-called rebel area, because apparently they are Russian separatists, and Russia is sponsoring those rebels to rebel against the Ukrainian government. So that's a little bit of the perspective on the Donbass region and those two cities and the eastern side of Ukraine that Major General mentioned. Sir, tell me one thing. What is the criticality? Why is Ukraine, whether they go into NATO or don't go into NATO, there are other countries from the former Soviet bloc that have joined NATO, and this kind of a meltdown hasn't happened before. So why is Ukraine, you mentioned a little bit about the fact that, little by little, since 1991, NATO and the Western powers have been encroaching closer and closer towards Russia, and obviously Russia feels threatened. Tell us a little bit about why Ukraine, why now?
Okay. There are two major reasons. One is the geostrategic location of Ukraine. Now, when I say geostrategic location of Ukraine, firstly, it's the last buffer zone between the two, that is between Russia and NATO, because all other countries of NATO are almost there. Correct. The second major reason is the Black Sea fleet and the access to sea, because if Ukraine is with NATO, then Russia can be cut off anytime from the Mediterranean. Now, that is something which is very, very serious for Russian security.
Correct.
So that is why when it came to Ukraine and when it came to Crimea, Putin had no choice but to respond. The third thing is that at some point of time, let's take from 2008 onwards, I think, what has been happening is that at that point of time when other countries joined NATO, Russia was not in a state to perhaps shall we say, take on so many countries together.
Correct.
Because if there is a country which is joining, let's say Poland is joining, there is something between Poland and Russian border, that is Ukraine itself. So therefore, it was not bringing NATO forces directly to your borders. Now, if you take the same analogy, to Korea, now you see in when North Korea and South Korea were trying to join and become one Korea, Chinese reacted very actively. And during Korean War, the only reason for China to get into Korean War was that they did not want to join border with NATO because South Korea was aligned with NATO. So they didn't want a direct land border with NATO, because then you can have tremendous amount of security implications. And they wanted North Korea to remain a buffer zone, and which is the case now. So the same analogy, if you put it here, that is where the Ukraine comes into. So basically, there are two reasons. One is the geostrategic location of Ukraine, which is uncompromisable for Russia. And second is the leadership. Now, why now? You mentioned this is the reason for why now. Till now, most of the Ukrainian leaders, they were either neutral, or even if they were talking about getting into Ukraine, that was not that loud a talk. But the present leader, he started, no, I am a sovereign country, and I will not give an inch of territory. And he was actually not compromising anything on the other on the side which you mentioned, those two regions, that is the Donbass region. Those two districts put together became are called as Donbass region. So therefore, when this was the situation, now there are different stories. Both have their own grievances, and both sides have their own. Because even as far as Ukrainians are concerned, they call them as rebels and they call them as separatists. Russia has also done. They've helped them. They've also given them their own passports. So Russia has also. They are not. Nobody is a holy cow in this game. So let's put it this way. And even Ukrainians have caused fair amount of casualties on Russians. They were forcing Ukrainian language on Russians. So the eastern portion of Ukraine is more aligned or more friendly towards Russia, and the western portion of Ukraine is more friendly towards Western countries. So that's the combination. So, so there is a divide within Ukraine as well. But the point is, the present leader, he is more inclined towards the West. And what they were, what Russians were feeling, that he has got the military trainers here. They also have, I mean, that is what Russians claim. We don't know whether it is right or wrong. But the fact is, the Russians claim that he has been in touch with Americans, which is quite obvious. And he has also been conspiring to be doing capacity building in a manner that he can be a springboard to launch offensive on Russia. So that is their claim, including the nuclear weapons or nuclear technology. So this is the allegation which they make. Whether it is true or not true, one can't really say. But
it's
then
a matter of perspective, sure.
Yeah. So this is the pretext which Putin has taken to do what he has done. So that's the reason why now and why Ukraine.
That was excellent. What I might want to add to that, Major General, is the fact that part of what you said, it's geographically very strategic. Part of that, I feel, is also the fact that it is Ukraine specifically is so rich in natural resources.
Yes.
They have uranium, they have titanium, they have all of these ores that are essentially used for nuclear power plants and things like that. So it is a very rich in natural resources, and that's another reason that it's such a critical geographically to the West as well as to Russia.
Yes, absolutely.
Major General, I want to ask about this one thing. So, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken, Anthony Blinken, said that Putin has his sights beyond Ukraine. Would you know what he means by that? Do you know that, what is he referring to and what is he thinking? Because, pretty much everything in that area is taken up either by NATO or by Russia. So do you have any ideas on, militarily, strategically, what the thought might be there past Ukraine?
I think the Secretary of State, he's picking up certain lines from Putin's speech. Now, Putin was quite cut up. He says that this is the biggest disaster. Disintegration of USSR is the biggest disaster.
Correct.
And what USA is interpreting is that maybe that Putin is trying to regain the glory of USSR. Correct. And perhaps he may think of joining some more countries with USSR or try to regain old USSR in the form it was to some extent, and perhaps make some moves towards that effect.
Correct.
Now,
And that makes sense. Over the
yeah,
past
so
few years, if you
they are
hear
apprehending.
Putin's.
That is what
Right.
they are apprehending. But if you see the Russian offensive which has taken place, firstly, he has planned and planned meticulously, and he has
Correct.
planned for a long time.
Correct.
If the Western allies couldn't see that through, then there is some strategic errors which have been done. What he has done is that he is now, firstly, he postured his forces, he did cyber attacks, he did information warfare, and he did everything what he could.
Right.
Then he postured his forces from three sides of Ukraine. And having postured the forces, his basic aim is that he has to strike on the mind of the leader. He's looking at the regime change. The center of gravity of his operations is regime change. And that is why the strategic objective was Kiev. Everybody was thinking that it is the Donbass region. It's not Donbass region.
Correct.
The strategic objective is Kiev. So why, and that is why he put his naval fleet also towards south. So he has now made a multi-pronged offensive. And why he had to go to Belarus was because that is the shortest route to Kiev.
Correct.
Now, apparently, Russian economy does not support an offensive beyond Ukraine.
Correct.
So, from
Right
the
now,
strategic analysis, as I analyze,
Uh-huh.
the fear of NATO that he may go beyond Ukraine for the time being are unfounded. For the time being. Because for the time being, I think his limited objective is that he must ensure a regime change or ensure that the current regime gives in its demand for Ukraine joining NATO and demilitarization of Ukraine. Because he wants, that is why the pattern of offensive which he has done is that initially he tried to destroy all the airfields and all the military assets. The aim is that he wants to destroy and demilitarize Ukraine to an extent that they are incapable of becoming a springboard for any future offensive on Russia.
Against
So
Russia.
that is the strategic aim, and with that aim, strategic and military aim, and with that is why he is encircling Kiev, and he is going to put tremendous amount of pressure, which he has done. And now the Ukrainian president is looking for a negotiation, which I am given to understand just before the show that they have agreed to, but with a precondition that Ukraine military must lay down arms.
Correct. Right.
So that is the status as it stands. As far as US apprehension is concerned, that he will go beyond that, I don't think for the time being, because even in Ukraine, he has to do a very swift operation and fall back again. He will keep, in my opinion, he is going to keep the Donbass region as an independent entity. And then having attained his strategic objective, he is going to move out from Ukraine, because if he remains there, then there will be insurgency which will be planted against him, and cost of remaining there is a heavy cost, and economically he cannot bear that cost. So to bring down the economic cost, he has to do a very swift operation, finish it off, and then get out of Ukraine and keep it as a buffer zone that protects him and meets his security interest best.
And that's a great explanation, and it remains to be seen what happens in the next couple of days. But I think that is a very sound analysis of prediction of what is going on and what is likely the outcome of this current operation. You mentioned, getting to Kiev, via Belarus, and very quickly getting to Kiev. We'll get to that in just a second. I want to ask you a little bit about Chernobyl, especially, and the taking over of Chernobyl too. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about India and India's stance on this entire issue. In the past, Ukraine and India have had, blow hot, blow cold relations. Ukraine has voted against India several times in the UN Security Council and things like that. So it's not like, Ukraine and India are the best of friends. The Ministry of External Affairs has officially said that their position is neutral. So they're not siding with, one side or another. What is your analysis of the situation and the stance of India specifically regarding this entire scenario?
See, in Indians, in the best interest of India, it is necessary that we don't pick up sides. And the reason is, firstly, we have fair amount of dependency on Russia as far as military hardware is concerned. Almost about 60% of our equipment is Russian equipment. And Russia, our partnership with Russia has been very long partnership. And it has stood the test of time even in 1971 war, when even US was against us.
Correct.
And they had sent 7th Fleet to deter us from whatever we were doing. So that's one part. So it's a very, shall we say, dependable relationship which has been, which has stood the test of time. As far as USA is concerned and the West is concerned, we have a very strong relationship which has developed even more after we have joined Quad and after the Chinese have shown aggressive stance and challenged the international order in Indo-Pacific region. So that is where our interests are matching with United States. So therefore, in our interest, we should not be picking up sides. That's one part of it. Now the second part is the morality part of it, because everybody is saying Ukraine is being invaded. There is a morality angle, and on morality angle, you should oppose Russia. That's the general feeling.
Correct.
Now, I want to now bring the morality angle in different manner. Firstly, when the Iraq war took place and USA entered and NATO entered Iraq by saying that they have got weapons of mass destruction, and there was none found, and they changed the regime and they hanged the former ruler as well.
Correct.
That time also there was a sovereignty issue. Did anybody sanction USA? No. And the reason was that nobody was economically sound to sanction USA.
Correct.
Because USA was controlling the financial system.
True.
So that's one part. Similarly, I'm not justifying what Russia has done is right. I've already told you that everybody, there is nobody who has got a clean slate. Everybody has played this sovereignty card to their interest whenever it demanded so. Similarly, in South China Sea, sovereignty of four countries was lost when China occupied those features and converted them into military bases.
Correct.
Similarly, the sovereignty of Afghanistan was also lost, and there was a democratic sovereign government sitting in Afghanistan, and USA was negotiating with Taliban.
Right. Correct.
So there is nobody who is in the clean slate. So nobody can give lectures to the other party because Russia can turn back and say, "This is what you did."
Right.
So
right.
how are you saying that I am doing something which you did not do earlier?
Correct.
You have also done the same thing.
Correct.
So
as Putin has been saying in all his speeches that we've heard from the past 5 years now, 6 years, he's been saying that. So
similarly, like I remember when somebody asked a question from Putin when he had a meeting with President Biden a few months back, that Navalny, you are doing all this and you are controlling and all that. He just said 2 lines. Do you know what is Black Life Matters? And he just left it at that. He says everybody has got its own problems and everybody handles his own problems in the manner in which he can handle that. So let's not talk of each other.
Correct.
So that's one. So as far as India is concerned, now coming on to Ukraine. when China was violating Indian sovereignty, they broke all the CBMs and they dragged us, and there was a debate in UNSC. Ukraine did not side Russia. So how can they cry foul today?
Right.
We have also fought. So the question is, you cannot say that now I am in trouble, so now you help me, and when somebody else is in trouble, then it is not my baby.
Exactly. Right.
So therefore, every country, and I don't blame Ukraine, every country looks after its own strategic interest. It was not in their strategic interest, they didn't do it.
At the
So
time.
as far as India is concerned, it is not in Indian strategic interest to pick up sides. So we will not pick up side. We should not pick up side. Why should we pick up side? And it is our sovereign decision that we don't want to, because you see, during World War I, subsequently, we were leaders of Third World. We didn't pick up sides at that point of time. Our sovereign decision. So if that be so, now we have made a sovereign decision when Chinese threat is becoming imminent for rest of the world. We have made a sovereign decision that we will join Quad, and we have joined Quad, and therefore we are with United States when it comes to Indo-Pacific. But when it comes to sanctions, and we may not be with United States as far as sanction is concerned, because we are convinced that sanction has never given any kind of dividend.
True.
So,
Major General, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't want to talk about sanctions just yet, because I will get to sanctions, and that's a very important part of our discussion. So I'm going to get to it in about 2 minutes. But before we go on to the sanctions, I want to, you brought up the morality part of the situation. I want to add to the morality part, I want to add the humanitarian part to it. So I want to add a humanitarian angle to it. And while we are talking about, India and India's stance in Ukraine, I want to mention that there are about 18,000 Indian students and Indian nationals that are currently in Ukraine and stuck in Ukraine. And, that to me is a humanitarian crisis. We've heard that in the Indian government has said, and the Indian ambassador in Ukraine sent out a video message yesterday asking everybody to stay calm, to stay in place. However, obviously, the students and their families back in India are extremely worried, are very, very concerned for the safety and security of their children and their family members. I actually have somebody in our studio here today. He's the father of one of the students who is currently in Ukraine. I want us to talk to him a little bit about the humanitarian aspect of the situation. And then, Major General, I'll come back to you and we'll talk a little bit more about other parts. Sandeep Tiku, welcome to the show. I heartily welcome you to Bharat FM Studios.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sandeep, can you tell us a little bit about the background? You told me that your son is currently in Ukraine. Tell me a little bit about what your son is doing there and what situation, where is he right now, what city is he right now, and what is his exact situation right now?
So my son, like many other parents, have also sent their students for their medical education to Ukraine, and he's currently in Kharkiv. I think he was in the process, and we knew that the Ukraine is going through this turmoil, and like the entire global space, this was more like an 8-year-old battle. But I think we somehow got in the crossfire, and the current situation is that many students are stranded, and there are a lot of passionate pleas coming in from the agents, because as parents, what is happening is the university does not connect with the parents directly. So you've got to be going through your consultants or the agents, and that is across the country. So there is a huge, strong presence of these 18,000 students, which are Donbas region. So what is really happening is that we are wanting the Indian government to really, take more stands, not just for the students and the many fellow Indians who are stranded next or close to the border, which is easier to travel, maybe 5-10 kilometers. But what is more concerning is the many 15,000 or more maybe I may be wrong with that number, but a very, very significantly large population of those students are on the northeast side, which is very, very close to the Donbass regions. And for them, due to the martial law, it's extremely difficult for them traveling right through the penetrating route through the Lviv and Kiev and reaching out to maybe a Romania or Poland or the Slavic country borders. So the only way out that we probably were looking at and requesting the government, especially the ministry, is to look at their long friend Russia to do, because that's the closest border.
Correct.
And any travel that would happen will be a lot of loss in life. So, and I think that is where my concern is, like many fathers and parents, is for their well-being. And also, Ms. Zutshi, which I also would like to mention, that what we are beginning to get certain signs is that if this was to continue for maybe another 48 hours or beyond, the essential supplies is going to take a hit. So there is no electricity. We're virtually managing just to exchange on the messages and maybe a quick video call, only to save the batteries. So we are looking at an alternate route. So maybe the Poland, the Romania is not a feasible option at this point in time. At least the first thing is to stop this war. A global condemnation at the same time, as a father and an Indian also has to be. It's not about picking sides. It's about, first and foremost, is to condemn the war. The war needs to stop.
True. It is truly a humanitarian crisis in that sense. Mr. Tiku, can you tell me when was the last time you had contact with your son, Sarthak, who's a medical student?
We were able to connect with him today. This was the first time that after about, a couple of days that I was able to have a video call, because my instructions were very clear: save the battery because the future is uncertain. And there is a long way out. So let us be wise. But I would also like to mention, Ms. Zutshi, here is that the children, as how he has said that, I can hear the bombings, I can hear the blast, I can hear the shellings, I can hear the sirens. It was very scary. And he managed to send us a picture which looked, more like a hostage situation. I'm not saying that it is, or any aspersions on the university. But that picture was a testimony of the tough times that could unfold on our many children.
True.
So it seems to be fine, but there are many concerns.
Yeah, the picture you've painted is, pretty horrific situation for these young students who, went there to build their careers and are, like you mentioned, stuck in the crossfire. Very, very unfortunate situation. Before I let you go, you did mention, Mr. Tiku, the fact that, the government of India needs to do a little bit more. This is your time. What is your direct message to the administration, and what is your appeal to them? Please share that.
I think I'll try and bring it on in a few points, which is one, that when we do these bilateral agreements and we call each other's friend, ally, and so forth, and it is in this particular time of need, the government very clearly has to look at the volume that is involved and communicate to the parents. Not just a ministry advisory that we request the parents to, send their children back. If that was true, the 19th or the 20th of February, there should have been no flight from India landing into Ukraine.
True.
So that is one. And the point number two, if it is 18,000 evacuees, it cannot be just 2 Air India flights that is to go. The government has to do a lot more. And if there is just about the Russia, I think the children and the substantial part has to come out to the Russia. And that would be a message of friendship, solidarity. If India takes a neutral stance, this is what we want, that our children come out either through Russia or whichever way. If it's an airlift, that needs to happen. And with a clear message, condemn the war, ask for the war to stop right away, and return of life to normalcy. And make sure that the children have all the necessary supplies. And I know 48 hours is going to be a difficult time for them. God bless them.
Right. My God, my thoughts and prayers are with you, your family, your son, and all of the students and all of the people who are stuck there right now. I
They're all
feel
very brave,
very, very.
Mizuchi. I must say that all the children are young. They're the future. They're all extremely brave, and they're all huddled together. They're on the ground in a bunker.
Yeah,
It is horrible to see that picture, haunting terribly.
yeah.
Wow, I can imagine. Like I said, my heartfelt thoughts and prayers are going to be with you and all of the family members. Thank you for
Thank you.
joining us, and thank you for sharing
Okay.
your
Can I
thoughts.
respond before he goes?
Sure, sure, absolutely.
Huh.
Sandeep,
Okay.
please meet Major
Firstly,
General Asthana.
I share your concerns absolutely, and not only your concern, but concerns of all the parents and all the children. Certainly, there is no doubt about it. Children have been unfortunately caught into crossfire, as you rightly brought out, and as Madam
Yeah.
also rightly brought out. So there is no doubt about it. As far as
Thank
the
you, Mizuchi.
humanitarian part is concerned, let me inform you a few things because I've been consistently on various television debates, and so therefore I'm getting fed by
Yes.
a lot of information, and I'm also speaking from the information which I have got. Now, what has happened is Prime Minister has certainly spoken to President Putin, and his main uh, point, the first on the topmost point was the children, evacuation of children. And Russia has assured that as far as children are concerned, they'll be allowed to move. The only thing is that perhaps as of now, I think with the kind of shelling, because now you see during fog of war, what happens is both sides keep blaming each other. Now Russians are saying those guys are firing. We are only saying that you peacefully finish off. The other side is firing, so we also have to fire and things like that. So as of now, what the universities and what everybody is doing is basically for the safety of the children, that they are not moving them. Otherwise, the MEA has spoken to the neighboring countries on the west. The route to the neighboring countries to the west has also been worked out. There are all the televisions are showing as to what is the methodology, how they will be taken to the west, and how they and there the flights will be sent. And the flights are also being. It's not necessarily that it is only Air India. If need be, then Indian Air Force will also be sending the flights. So everything has been worked out. The only thing is, as of now, getting out from the dugouts in the open air is risky for the children as of now. So perhaps we will have to have little more patience till the shelling comes into some kind of shall we say control. So that's the situation. But notwithstanding that, the most important thing which Prime Minister spoke to President Putin was the evacuation of these children. That is the topmost agenda as far as India is concerned. And all neighboring countries have been spoken to by the MEA. So that is the information which I can give you. If it is of some assurance or kind, I would say, if
That's
it
a
gives you
lot.
some kind of comfort.
Thank you so much, Major General Astana, for your assurance. And this small little message of assurance will bring up a lot of cheer and smile amongst the 400 students that are holed up in that particular bunker. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that fills me with hope. And, I really hope for the safety of those children, which is obviously prime importance right now for us Indians. We are all with you in thought and spirit, Mr. Tiku. Great. All right. So that I have to take a moment from that because I
No
feel
problem.
very strongly about children and how children should not be caught in the crosshairs of political games, so to speak. It's very, very sad humanitarian situation. Okay, Major General Asana, let me switch back to what we were talking about. So you had mentioned the path that the Russian incursion has taken. I want to mention for a little bit. So let's talk about Chernobyl. And they stated publicly that they have Chernobyl under their control. And the global concern is that, any shelling around Chernobyl, might, either hit the reactors that are, that did not explode, back in 83, but also the fact that there is radioactive dust there. So any kind of shelling in and around Chernobyl might, create, health impact and radioactive elements to be dispersed in the environment and in the area surrounding it. What do you think is the reason and the criticality of the path that they took and the public claim that they said, we have Chernobyl? Can you talk to us a little bit about that, please?
See, as far as Russians are concerned, Chernobyl falls in that route. That's one part of it.
Correct.
The second thing is Chernobyl is a famous location. So when you talk of from the information warfare and propaganda perspective, it has a very high, shall we say, everybody can switch on to Chernobyl because everybody knows what is Chernobyl. So once they say that, okay, Chernobyl is in our control, that means the Russians are very well in control of the northern part of Ukraine. That
Kyiv is next.
That's the indication which they want to give. The third thing is that certainly they don't want, as you rightly mentioned, there should be no firing on Chernobyl because there may be a nuclear waste and it could trigger some kind of awkward. So that even Russians are also worried, because obviously their troops are also moving in that area. So what they have done is that apparently they have taken control of Chernobyl to ensure that there is no firing there. And I don't think there will be a firing there because they have gone way ahead of Chernobyl towards Kiev. So with that, apparently even if Ukrainian military forces have to respond back, they will not respond back on Chernobyl. So that may be one of the reasons. But certainly, it's also a big, I would say, a morale booster for President Putin and Russian army that Chernobyl is there because that's a famous place. So in the propaganda war, what happens is, it's not only when he has to see his center of gravity for this operation is the mind of Ukrainian leader that he must surrender. Because if he surrenders, the war stops. It's as simple as that.
Correct.
So, in doing so, he will like to take control of certain strategic locations, and Chernobyl is a strategic location. So, it's not only Chernobyl. Once they get into Kiev, I think they will have a number of other strategic locations which they would have already listed out because they have wargamed their plans very well. So, they will try and take control of number of things, like they have done so well in a manner that they are looking at the that airfield which is on the outskirts of Kiev. So the advantage is that if that airfield is with them, even if somebody wants to help Ukraine, he can't, because if airfield is with the Russians, then you can't help it. Similarly, their Black Sea fleet has blockaded the sea channel, so nobody can help Ukraine. So even if you want to help Ukraine, you can't. So that is the way the planning has been done. That's the way the military planning has been done. And that is what is relevant. I think the Russians themselves are also quite aware of the danger. And that danger can affect them as well. So I don't think that's a rest of the world. And for rest of the world also, there is a propaganda issue. Because if you want to make Putin a villain, and if you want to discredit Russia, which obviously everybody is trying to, and rightly so, because so many things have happened. So in that context, also Chernobyl has an importance and a propaganda value that they are doing this and they are firing. So there can be firing there and it can have a catastrophic effect and things like that.
True. To me, it feels like, it's back to the Cold War times where, everybody knew that, nuclear warfare is going to mean devastation on both sides. And so, people were trying to have the self-control. And so to me, it feels like that strategy has come back. Russia is aware that, if they, initiate anything, and the US and the NATO forces are aware that if they initiate anything, there is just going to be disaster on both sides. So it's a lose-lose situation in that sense.
Yes.
Major General, I have one more question for you. So, actually, before I let you go, I have two important aspects that I want to discuss with you, and then I know you're a really busy man, and we'll let you go. I promise you.
No
So,
problem.
I want to talk a little bit about accidental escalation. So, a lot of conversations have happened around the fact that, Biden very clearly said that he's not going into Ukraine. Ukraine is not a member of NATO, so they are not going to go in there. However, they have been helping them with arms. They have, been arming them for the last few weeks and months, and are continuing to help them that way. However, they are staying outside of the boundaries of Ukraine in all the other adjoining NATO countries. The question is that what do you think are the chances of accidental escalation? Because Russian forces are over there in the bordering countries, and NATO forces are in the bordering countries. What, again, militarily explain to me if there are chances of accidental skirmishes happening and then that escalating the situation. What are the chances of that?
See, as far as accidental triggers are concerned, I think both sides are quite conscious of that. Russians will also be very conscious of not to do anything along border, or you would have seen that even in the offensives which they have launched, if you see the line of their offensive, it has not been very close to any of the border countries in the West. So they are also quite conscious that there should be no accidental trigger, and so will NATO be. So both sides are quite conscious of that. And even if, let's say, hypothetically, one odd shell lands up at a wrong place, then there are mechanisms, I think, between both of them, with which they can resolve. And mind you, even now, the channel of communication has not closed down. People are speaking to Russians. Even a number of Western countries, I think Macron spoke yesterday. President Macron has been speaking yesterday. So those channels are open. So it's not that the channels have been closed. So apparently, I do not visualize, because the intent on both sides is very clear.
Right.
So as far as Putin is concerned, he has given out his intent very clearly, that it is Ukraine and Ukraine. Ukraine not joining NATO, period.
Right.
And as far as NATO is concerned, they have given an intent, not an inch of NATO, and period. So nobody has. So I think the battle lines are so clear. These kinds of, in fact, the chances of trigger are much more in South China Sea. I would put it this way, because there the postage is very high. Ships are getting into each other's firing zone and things like that. And there are air incursions happening on Taiwan. So there the chances of accidental trigger are much higher than what I find that the chances of trigger are there in Ukraine.
Currently in Ukraine. Great. Major General, you spoke earlier about sanctions. And let's talk for a couple of minutes really quickly about sanctions. You said, sanctions aren't going to help that much. Historically, they've proven not to help that much. However, I've read several reports that say that if there are more sanctions, so for example, if SWIFT is taken away, then they're going to choke their, oil and natural gas pipelines. And so if those financials, don't reach Russia, then Russia will suffer the economic impact of sanctions. But then I've also read that the results of the sanctions are going to take a few years to actually materialize. So sanctions don't really help. So tell me a little bit about, Biden has imposed sanctions, initial sanctions, but then there are more sanctions, that were just announced. SWIFT is still on the table. They haven't taken that away. So tell us a little bit about sanctions and what might be the solution on that, and how impactful are they really?
See, I reiterate that sanctions are not that impactful for very simple reason. One is both sides know what is their red line, even on sanctions. US, you would have seen there were reporters questioning President Biden yesterday night when they were saying, why don't you sanction Putin now? And he didn't say anything. Then they said, why don't you put SWIFT on out? Why don't you sanction or the SWIFT transaction? Then also he didn't say anything. Now, if you read the sanction between the lines, the energy has not been touched because he knows that the moment he touches energy, his European friends are going to raise their hand.
Right, exactly.
So that's one part of it. Secondly, Nord Stream 1, the company which is operating Nord Stream 1, that is sanctioned, but yet the gas is flowing into Europe. These sanctions are more for the domestic consumptions, let me put it in no uncertain terms, and they are not going to deter Putin's offensive. That is also quite clear, and that even President Biden also knows, and he said in that many terms that it's going to hit Russia in the long term and not in the short term. That's one part. Second thing is that as far as sanctions are concerned, see, USA is a big economy, there is no doubt about it. USA also has got a major stake in the financial system. They control the major financial system in the world. And that is why people do pay heed to sanctions. But if you start using this weapon far too often, then the weapon also loses its sheen, and alternate arrangements are made. Now you see what Russia has done. Before he went into this operation, he has, despite he being less than 2 trillion economy, he has collected almost $600 billion of foreign exchange, which is fourth largest in the world. So he is prepared to that extent. That's one. Secondly, he has also struck a deal with China. You stop his gas this side, he will supply more to China, and China will stop lesser from your allies, that is Saudi Arabia and things like that. So there is a connect there. The third thing is, if you stop his gas, and also if you cut him off from SWIFT, then how does Europe pay to Russia? And if Russia stops his gas, Europe is going to freeze. That is the situation. And if Europe freezes, their public is going to go against all their leaders. And those leaders will say, thank you very much. USA, you are please sitting so much of this thing. You are not facing any heat of this because you are self-sufficient in energy. We are not self-sufficient in energy. So please don't muddle with our public. Because that public is not going to let them live peacefully. So therefore, there is a limit to which... so there is an implication both ways, and Putin is... you have to grant him because in this whole game, that's why I said that West has been overconfident and have overplayed and thought that by sanctions and condemnations they'll be able to check Putin, and that is an absolutely wrong strategy. And the second part is, which all viewers must know, NATO does not have a plan B. Now that their sanctions and condemnation has failed, they just don't have plan B, and they are silent spectators to the disaster which is happening in Ukraine and the humanitarian disaster which is happening in Ukraine. Everybody, all of us can sympathize, but they did not keep a plan B up their sleeves.
Oh, that is amazing. What an insightful analysis of that situation, and a very scary one also for me, knowing that there wasn't a plan B and, in so many minds put together. Thank you, Major General. Before I let you go, you mentioned before that this war could end if Zelensky gives in and surrenders. Is that the end? What is the end as far as your analysis goes? What are your thoughts on how is this crisis going to end?
Apparently, had the fight not been that fierce, because what has happened is that although Russia has prepared for very long, but so has Ukraine forces also. So Ukraine forces were also mentally prepared to fight.
True.
Now, when the fight gets into the built-up areas, then it becomes long. So far, Russian forces have avoided built-up areas, and therefore there had been swift offensive. But if the Ukrainians start giving a pitched battle in Kiev, then what will happen is that this will get prolonged.
True.
Now, as far as the Ukrainian leader is concerned, if he gives in fast, then perhaps the war could end earlier. And now that he has shown some signs, because he himself has come on TV and said that we can at best fight for 72 hours and not beyond that.
True.
So this is from the Ukrainian president. So if it is 72 hours there, this will also have a telling effect on the morale of the guys who are fighting. So then it could be lesser than 72 hours. Now, what I visualize is that Putin has put a condition that, okay, you should be, the Ukrainian army should lay down its arms. That is the condition that they have put. We will have to see as to how situation develops. But what, in my opinion, is I think the Ukrainian president is now ready to be neutral and ready to give up the demand for admission into NATO and remain a neutral country. So I think if he remains a neutral country, now I think it will depend on, because he still doesn't have enjoy a confidence of the Russian. So whether Putin will stop and hear him out, or Putin is determined to change the regime, that events will unfold the moment the first meeting happens, because I think the first meeting is going to happen in Minsk.
Correct. It's imminent. So we'll find out very soon.
So once the first meeting happens, if the first meeting fails, that means it is a regime change which will end the war. If the first meeting ends up on a peaceful note, and we all must hope so for the humanitarian reason, and we all should pray for that to happen, then I think the agony will end earlier.
True. And very, very wise and very sage words. And I totally, absolutely agree that war is never a solution. Let's look for, diplomacy. Let's look for diplomatic ways to end this war and end this humanitarian crisis for the Russian people, for the Ukrainian people, and, from my personal perspective, all the Indians that are currently stuck in Ukraine as well. Thank you for your time, Major General Asthana. I really appreciate you coming to our studios and explaining and unpacking the ongoing situation in Ukraine for us. Thank you very much. And thank you to all our viewers today for joining us. We will keep you informed. We will keep you posted. Thank you. Good night, sir.